I started going down this rabbit hole of thinking about what is money when I realized that I was in essence going to lose my company, right, and destroy the livelihoods of all my employees and, waste 30 years of my life. And so when I started thinking about it, and, it's helpful when Raoul Pal says, when I'm thinking about raising interest rates, your strategy of investing in bonds is broken. When I started thinking about it, what I realized is money is energy. Money is economic energy, socio-political energy. Currency is a medium through which the energy moves. If you wish to hold energy and transport energy, you need a technology. We're not using gold anymore. When we use gold, as I pointed out, it's expensive and it's cumbersome. Currencies don't work. The U.S. dollar is the strongest currency in the world, but is losing 15 to 20% of its value a year. The peso is losing 40 to 50% of its value a year. The bolivar is losing 100%, 98% of its value a year. So once you start thinking about it that way, you start thinking, well, what's a better way to store economic energy through time? And you realize that the currencies don't work, gold doesn't work. So what is money? Well, money in the last 30 years became the S&P index. You buy a diversified portfolio of companies, of stocks, which is a little bit better because maybe you're getting bled 2% a year by the management team, but the company's making money, and so maybe you can hold value. It turns out that the money's losing about 10% of its value a year, and the S&P index is going up about 10% a year. And you look at that for 100 years, and there's a very interesting correlation there. A diversified portfolio of assets is tracking the money supply. Okay, interesting. What's the problem with that? Well, the problem with holding stocks as a store of value is if the stock goes up by a factor of 10, there's a management team that has a fiduciary obligation to issue more stock. There's a temptation to issue stock. Stocks aren't scarce. The amount of equity shares will also go up. If the stock is overvalued versus the fundamentals of the company, the CEO is almost certainly going to issue more stock. And so that's one problem. The second problem is stocks have political nexus. They have management teams. They're in countries. They can be unionized. I can put a tariff on the product. I've got a competitor. What if the CEO goes bonkers? All sorts of interesting problems. What if the company gets expropriated by the government, or the jurisdiction it operates within? So stocks are an imperfect approach, better than gold. The other approach is buy a bunch of buildings in New York City, buy scarce, desirable real estate in Miami, Los Angeles, London. That's an interesting idea, and the best idea in the 20th century, if you're going to try to either create wealth or hold your wealth. If you want to hold your wealth, you buy $1 billion worth of property. If you want to create wealth, you borrow $1 billion, and you buy $1 billion of property, and you start with $1 million of equity, a sliver of equity, and what you're doing is you're going short the currency and you're going long the property. So if I told you, let's go to Argentina. If I told you in Argentina the peso is going to go from 1 peso to the dollar, to 5 pesos to the dollar, to 10 pesos to the dollar, to 20 pesos to the dollar, to 40, to 80, to 100, the black market rate right now is 210 pesos to the dollar, 220. If I told you it was going to collapse from 1 to 220, and you had 20 years of notice, what's your best strategy? Take your million pesos, convert it to dollars, and you're going to have 220 million pesos in 20 years. You're going to look rich. Better strategy is borrow 1 million pesos, convert it to dollars.
Wow.
Best strategy would be mortgage your entire company in pesos, sell equity in your company in pesos, convert it all to dollars, and then get the dollars out of the country. Because if they're in the country, if the million pesos is converted to dollars in a bank in Argentina, then the government will basically pass a law, force your dollars to be converted back into pesos, devalue them. And I happen to have some experience with that because I actually had $1 million in Argentina during the last currency collapse. They converted it to pesos. They devalued it 10 to 1. A day later, I'd lost 90% of my money. So, simple idea. Short the currency which is collapsing. Go long property and then get the property out of the country. Because the property in the country is also going to devalue. Because the property is valued based upon the stream of cash flows, right? If the building has got a rentor and it's got a lease, and the lease is capped at CPI or denominated in local currency, when the currency collapses, the value of the rental income also collapses. So wouldn't it be great if I could buy a virtual building in Argentina using borrowed pesos? And then what if I could spirit the building out of the country and rent it to people in London or New York City? That's what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is digital property that you can teleport anywhere in space instantly. And it's also perfected property with the lowest maintenance cost. You know, you don't have the property tax you have on a building. You don't have to repaint the thing every 10 years. You don't have to worry about leaks in the roof. So if I could buy $1 billion worth of property and it was in cyberspace, and if you couldn't make any more of it, if I capped it at 21 million city blocks in cyberspace, and if I could hold it for 1,000 years, I might have a better idea than buying a city block in Manhattan or a building in London or even a company. And it's a lot better idea than buying 30,000 pounds worth of gold. Why? Because real estate developers are going to create more buildings, gold miners are going to create more gold, mayors are going to pass a property tax, and they're going to put some kind of enjoinder or some kind of restriction on your rents. Rent control your building. Something, acts of God are going to create earthquakes and floods and lightning strikes. And none of that stuff's happening in cyberspace. So the whole idea of Bitcoin is it's perfected, engineered gold, crypto gold, with none of the defects of gold. You can't mine any more of it. It's weightless. I can move it at the speed of light. It never decomposes. I can break it into 1,000 pieces in a second, send it to 1,000 places, and recompose it, all using a computer program. And I can take personal custody of it. Maybe the most powerful two ideas are: I can hold possession of $1 billion of Bitcoin in my head, just holding a password or a set of private keys. That's a pretty big idea. Maybe the first time in the history of the human race that you can actually take possession of your wealth and take it to the grave with you, or take it anywhere else on earth with you. And even if I put a gun to your head, the most I can do is kill you. I can't take it. Mm-hmm. And this is a very interesting idea. Every other form of property in the history of the human race, I pull the gun, I get it all. Right? My incentive is to violence. With Bitcoin, I pull the trigger, I get none of it. So the incentive is the negotiation. I'd rather have half than zero, right? And it's a very interesting idea, big idea.